Last little story to clean up with here is my personal favorite company, AAC, just laid off half of its staff. So half of AAC Ammo just got laid off. I saw it coming, but most did not. I enjoyed it and wished everyone well. Now, this was this was posted in my Discord, and I was like, "There's no way." Please, somebody, if somebody has actual evidence to this, please send it my way. Because again, this is just some random person posting on the Palmetto State Armory subreddit that half of AAC, if you're not familiar, AAC, Americans Ammunition Company, is a sub brand of Palmetto State Palmetto State Armory, which is owned by JJE or one of those big conglomerate guys. So, anyways, they're related. So, them laying off half of their workforce is a big deal. So, at first, I did not believe this whatsoever, not at all. But then their own guys are in the comments of that post, and they are saying it did happen, but not for the reasons you think. So the top comment says they kept 90 or so people. So I imagine they had at least or almost 200, I would say. They lost a lot of contracts due to poor quality. They laid off all the newer people, and I expect more layoffs to follow. Now, that's his comment on the PSA subreddit on that post. Then a official PSA staff follows up. So this basically confirms it, but for a different reason, right? So the official PSA staff member comments this is 100% false. AAC did not lose contracts due to quality. There is a global powder shortage, and it has unfortunately resulted in the company needing to reduce staff on one shift of the ammunition production line. So again, that is very corporate speak. A lot of the times when you lose, like all the big companies, they'll lay off something insane, like 30% of their workforce, which is like hundreds and hundreds of employees. And they're like, you know what, guys, we just need to adapt to challenging markets and streamline ourselves for future profitability. Right. Like I think NVIDIA just laid off like 35%, one of those big tech companies just laid off a huge amount of people since their stock crashed so much, because the first thing to go is something that you can cut costs immediately, which is staff.
Yep.
You can cut your operating costs by 20, 30, 40% just by letting go of a bunch of people. Right. And this also happens a lot when companies expand very quickly. We kind of talked about this earlier, like during the COVID boost, that a lot of like streaming companies and other companies that where their services were used a lot more during the COVID lockdowns. So they got this huge influx of cash. They brought on all this new staff. They tried to do all these new projects. 2024, 2025 starts to roll around, and we see all the numbers start to go down. And it's like, well, all those guys that we just hired, sorry, homies, you're gone. So AAC is a new-ish ammunition company. They do a lot of volume, but again, their main claim is just that there is a global powder shortage. Now, other people can tell me whether or not that specifically is true, but that is how Palmetto State Armory is framing it. This is not a qual. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to your point about the rapid growth and expansion of these companies, it's a lot of it's poor forecasting, but a lot of it was people really assumed that it was permanent, like that this was really the way of the world going forward. And you have people who are mad, that, oh, the company grew and they hired me and then they let me go. You have the people on the outside looking in saying, oh, the company that I like hired and then fired a bunch of people. But what people don't realize, and I'm not defending any big corporation when I say this, is that if the company doesn't make sound financial decisions, both in growing and in reducing their workforce, they're just eventually going to cease to exist. And if you're reliant on their products for some reason, now you're screwed because they didn't make the right decision.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, this has knockdown effects, especially for the bigger companies, right? For a ammunition company, not that big of a deal, but for like, manufacturers of different things in different fields, it can be a huge issue, right? So the bean counters where the accountants are like, hey, you need to cut X amount of staff, and that will make us solvent in the current, next year or whatever, right? So then they do that, and then their output drops, right? So you have it forecasted that you're going to make this much money, but then you cut that down more than what you forecasted, right? And so now you screwed yourself out by losing too many people. So it is a tricky place to be in, which is kind of glad why I'm a very small operator and don't have any actual employees, because that's always something that I'm worried about, like bringing somebody on or a couple people on, three, four, five, and then just a couple months later being like, oops, I made a mistake. Sorry, guys, you guys got to go find other work now. That is something that I do not want to do. The last little comment here is, so why are they laying off so many people? Is it slow for ammo sales? Essentially, is did sales drop off? And then again, the official PSA response is sales are going gangbusters. There's a powder shortage across the industry. We can't get the same amount of powder we were receiving this past year. So essentially, you can't get the powder, so you can't produce the ammo, so you can't make the money, so you got to cut staff, right? And I mean, ammo specifically is a very, very tight business model. Margins are very low. So if you're not pumping out volume, you lose money very, very quickly. So
I don't know how much I believe PSA on this one, because they also mentioned about 2 weeks ago, maybe more, that they were going to be cutting 545 ammo from their lineup completely.
right, but that actually kind of makes sense if they're forecasting demand for that to be very low, right? Overall, there's going to be like a couple thousand people that are very excited for that. But if they're forecasting demand to be very low, then they're going to take all of that powder they have, right? If there is an actual legit shortage, I don't trust PSA, but if there is, they're going to put that into their hot selling lines, 5.56, 9mm, whatever it happens to be, right? I wouldn't be pumping out 8.6 blackout right now, or whatever. Well, actually, maybe I would, because it's a high margin round. You might actually be making the most money off of something like that. But again, different things to consider.
But then they want to come out with a 50 cal.
Well, yeah. So T-Rex has a good point, because T-Rex has almost 100 employees, I want to say. Says not all turnover is bad turnover. When some employees get nuked, they claim layoffs to shift the blame of their own lack of performance. Not all layoffs are traditional layoffs. No, of course not. And I mean, especially like I've worked retail for, since I was 16 years old until I got out of college, basically. And so, yeah, there were absolutely employees that needed to be canned, right, for just not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And that happens in every industry. Usually when people call the traditional sort of layoffs, it's like you see like a company A drops 30% of its workforce overnight, or they close down, that studio that's over there or whatnot. Now, where it is actually beneficial is like you look at like X, for instance, where they cut out like 80% of the staff, some ridiculous amount of staff on X, and were just profitable this last month or something like that. And like, obviously they didn't need all those extra people. You could say the same with government, maybe we should cut out a lot of government waste as well. So yeah, not all layoffs are bad layoffs, but if we take PSA's word on this, it is simply just a powder shortage and not a mismanagement of people that they brought on too fast. Right.